Welcome back. I warmly welcome you all once again. I hope you are all doing well. I am here with a remarkable incident to share with you. The story I'm about to tell has been given to me by Sumitra Roy. He lives in Dhaka, and this incident revolves around one of his friends, whose name is Mim. He collected this story from her. The story centers on a haunted house, and I will try to present a long narrative today, combining several small terrifying events, inshallah. So, without further ado, let's get straight to the main incident. This happened about 7 to 8 years ago, in the house where Mim lived. Today's full story is primarily made up of several smaller incidents that occurred there. First, a little description of the place is necessary. The location is in Kadamtala, Shyambag, Dhaka. The building where they lived was situated in a narrow lane, right next to another building. These two buildings were adjacent, with almost no space between them. The situation was such that one could easily move from the roof of one building to the roof of the other. There are many such buildings in Dhaka, especially in old Dhaka. We often see such structures. However, in the narrow space between these two buildings, there was naturally no way to enter. So if anything accidentally fell there from a window, it could never be retrieved. Mim lived on the 5th floor of the first building. One day, at the beginning of this story, guests had come to their house. For this reason, her mother told her to sleep in the living room that night. To Mim, this was quite normal, as she had slept in the living room many times before when guests visited. That night, after chatting with the guests for a long time, it was almost 2 o'clock when she went to sleep. Then she heard many dogs barking frighteningly in the lane outside their house. Hearing the dogs bark like that reminded her of something her aunt had once told her, that dogs can sense the presence of jinns. They often bark like this when they sense something bad at night. Thinking this, Mim felt a little scared, especially since she was alone in the living room. It was natural for her to be frightened by the dogs barking, and recalling her aunt's words made her even more fearful. At that moment, Mim suddenly felt that the sound of anklets was coming from a building across the street. At first, she thought it was perhaps her imagination, but when she tried to listen carefully, she heard it clearly again and realized that it was not her mind playing tricks on her. She thought maybe someone was practicing dance in that building at night. But in the next moment, she questioned herself, who would practice dancing at such a late hour? Then where was the sound of the anklets really coming from? As Mim pondered this, she felt that the anklet sound was slowly growing louder, and it seemed to be approaching the living room, as if some unseen figure wearing anklets was walking through the air, coming straight toward where she lay. Mim was so scared that she could not move. At one point, the sound reached very close to her feet near the window of the living room, and at that very moment, she heard a loud thud, as if something heavy had fallen inside the room near her feet. As soon as the sound occurred, the sound of the anklets stopped completely. After that, everything went silent, and the night became completely still. Mim was so frightened that she could not sleep. But since there were guests at home that night, she did not call anyone, as she feared they would misunderstand her story. So she kept reassuring herself that it must have been her imagination, although deep down, she knew it was not. She stayed quietly in her place, and finally, after the Fajr prayer, she was able to fall asleep. The next morning, she was woken by her mother's call. Since she had overslept a bit, she hurriedly got ready and went to school. After school, when she returned home, her eyes fell on the wall above the living room door. There had been a framed picture of the Kaaba with the word Allah written on it, but it was no longer there, leaving the spot empty. Mim asked her mother where the picture was. Her mother explained that when she woke up, she came into the living room and found the Kaaba picture on the floor. She had picked it up and noticed that the string used to hang it on the wall had snapped, which is why it had fallen. She had left it on the table instead of rehanging it. Upon hearing this, Mim went to the living room and saw the picture on the table. She then realized that the loud thud she had heard the previous night had been the sound of this picture falling. Afterward, Mim told her mother about everything that had happened the previous night. Her mother, understanding the situation, tried to comfort her by suggesting that maybe she had dreamed it while half asleep. But Mim knew very well that it had not been a dream, and her mother also understood that this was a real event. This was essentially how the series of events began. A few days later, a woman from the second floor of the building came to talk to Mim's mother. She then told him about a terrifying experience she had. One afternoon during her free time, she had sat down to do some sewing, with a needle and thread in hand. She was trying to thread the needle, and had almost succeeded, when suddenly her hand moved strangely to the right. It felt as if someone had gently pushed her hand aside. At first, she didn't give it much importance and tried again to thread the needle, but the same thing happened once more. Dear listeners, threading a needle is a delicate task, and she was quite skilled at it. Yet strangely, she kept failing unnaturally. Frustrated, she exclaimed aloud, "Why is this happening?" The moment she said this, she suddenly heard a harsh and heavy voice whisper something near her ear. She could not understand what was being said. It was a strange, guttural sound, not recognizable as any language. Although she did not comprehend its meaning, the voice filled her with extreme fear. She dropped everything in her hands and ran out of her room, screaming. Hearing her screams, her family members rushed to her, gave her water, and fanned her hands to calm her down. It was winter, and she was drenched in sweat, feeling unwell. Once she felt a little normal, she told her family what had happened. Even after hearing everything, her family was not overly surprised. Such minor incidents were known to happen often in that building. People sometimes heard strange noises on the roof at night, sounds similar to pounding something with a wooden pestle on spices. Those living on the sides of the adjacent building had occasionally heard the crying of a small child coming from the narrow gap between the two buildings, even though it was such a tiny space that only a rat could possibly pass through, let alone a newborn child. Yet from that narrow space, the sound of a child's cry would echo. A few months after Mim's experience, her family decided to move to the neighboring building, where her uncle's family already lived. When they found an empty flat, they shifted there. For a few days after moving, there were relatively no problems. One day, as Mim was returning from school and about to enter the house, the elderly lady living in the adjacent flat opened her door and began speaking to Mim in a series of incoherent sentences. Her behavior was very childlike. Since they were new to the building and did not know anyone well, Mim was slightly frightened and quickly went inside, locking the door. Later, when Mim told her mother about the lady, her mother inquired with another neighbor and learned that the woman suffered from mental illness, which caused her to behave in such a childish and erratic manner. Understanding this, Mim's mother refrained from questioning her further, sensing that there might be more the woman was withholding. But more terrifying events were yet to come, events no one could have anticipated. One afternoon, suddenly, loud commotion was heard from the adjacent flat. When they opened the door, many people from the building had gathered there. Mim's family went out of curiosity and saw that the elderly lady was again speaking loudly and incoherently like a child. The moment she saw Mim, she ran and grabbed her hand, saying, "This girl, come with me, sit on the sofa." She made Mim sit beside her on the sofa. Mim felt extremely uncomfortable and scared, but she quietly sat down. As soon as she sat, the lady began rambling incoherently again, with no connection in her speech. Everyone present tried to calm her as one would calm a child. It is important to note that the lady had a daughter who had been quietly standing beside the bed, observing everything. Once the lady calmed down a bit, everyone told the girl that since her mother was quite unwell, she should help her mother with various tasks. Upon hearing this, the girl stared at everyone in shock, appearing extremely frightened, annoyed, and astonished at the thought of having to assist her mother. She then left the room and went to the balcony. A few days later, when Mim's aunt visited them on the balcony, she revealed that both the elderly lady and her daughter were being affected by several powerful and terrifying jinns. When a religious scholar, Huzur, was called, he explained that these jinns were extremely strong and did not want anyone to live in that house. To avoid encountering serious problems, he advised that leaving the house would be the wisest course of action. At that time, due to some financial difficulties, the elderly lady and her family were not in a position to suddenly move to another place. So, out of necessity, they had to stay in that house, ignoring all the problems. Mim's aunt further explained that those who lived on the top floors of that building would sometimes hear footsteps on the roof at night. The sound was very much like a child running barefoot across the roof from one side to the other. and it was usually heard in the deep hours of the night. One day, around 9 p.m., they heard the sound again. When they went up to the roof, they saw no one there, but they noticed the swing on the roof slowly swaying. There was no wind, and the swing, being heavy, could not have been moved by air. It appeared as though someone had been sitting on the swing for a long time and had just gotten up, causing it to sway. Although they went down at that moment, the next morning they informed the building's caretaker about what had happened. The caretaker, however, said these were no problems and advised them to ignore such noises and never go up on the roof at night. But this was hardly a solution. Why forbid them from going up if there was no issue? Several more months passed. One night, Mim had a strange dream. In the dream, she was lying in her room when the door began to slowly open. In the dim light of the dimly lit room, she saw a tall, dark, shadowy figure entering. The figure came closer to her while she lay in bed. Frightened, Mim screamed. The shadow reached her bedside and pressed heavily on her throat. She felt intense pain in her neck and struggled to free herself. Suddenly, she woke up sitting upright, feeling extremely unwell. She felt the same pain in her throat and realized that this had happened in her dream. But she was even more shocked when she noticed that her room's door was open, just as in her dream, although she clearly remembered having locked it before sleeping, as she always did. The realization that the shadow from her dream had slowly opened the door and entered her room caused her fear to multiply. She woke everyone up and told them everything. Her father recited prayers and blew on her to calm her. That night, Mim could not sleep at all. Everyone decided that the house needed to be vacated quickly. However, no one knew that another terrifying incident was about to occur. A day or two later, Mim was studying in her room. For some reason, she stepped out to another room, leaving all the lights on in her room. When she returned with her parents, she suddenly saw someone sitting on her bed, completely covered with a blanket, reading aloud in a swaying motion, the kind of swaying reading sometimes seen in people. It was no longer winter, so the blanket had not been brought in for warmth. Mim did not understand where the blanket had come from, as it belonged to her room and had not been placed elsewhere for someone to use. The figure, fully wrapped in the blanket, was reading aloud in a rough, rolling voice, but Mim could not understand the words. Frightened, she cautiously grabbed one side of the blanket and yanked it away, only to see that there was nothing inside. It was as if a small, dark shadow had jumped out and vanished through the window. Seeing this, Mim screamed and fainted. The event was so terrifying that no one could have anticipated it. After this, her father decided that the house must be vacated immediately, even before the end of the month. Finding a suitable new house was difficult, but no matter how hard, leaving before more serious harm occurred was necessary. Once the decision to leave was final, one day when the housemaid came to work, Mim's mother told her about the situation. She mentioned that when they moved to the new house, if the maid could continue working there, she would retain her. Curious, the maid asked why they were leaving the house. Mim's mother lightly explained the circumstances. After hearing everything, the maid revealed that the street in which their house was located had many frightening aspects, and that many people in the area were aware of them. At that moment, Mim was sitting on the sofa watching TV. Upon hearing this, she asked the maid to explain what she meant. The maid replied that it was a terrifying matter. He said that many people in the area have reportedly seen, during the late hours of the night while walking along this road, a woman dressed in a red sari sitting as if asleep. Whenever anyone tries to pass by her and move forward, the woman supposedly calls out in a very sweet voice from behind, saying, "Take me with you." In this way, the woman would insist in various ways, urging and pleading, and she would want anyone to glance back at her even just once. But everyone in the area more or less knows that if someone dares to look back, a terrible misfortune could occur. Many such incidents have reportedly happened in that area, and many people have witnessed them firsthand. The household help further explained that at one time there was only water surrounding this area. Later, the water bodies were filled with soil, and these buildings were constructed. Mim still lives in the area, but in a different house. However, since moving from the previous house, no terrifying events have occurred for Mim. So, this was the story. Dear listeners, these small incidents I've recounted are all true. And if anyone lives on that side of Shambag, they would undoubtedly be aware of the truth of these events. Thank you. Now I am going to read another new story for you. This one is also a true incident, written exactly as it happened. The writer said that the incident happened to them personally. At that time, they had just moved into a new house. A few days after moving in, this incident occurred. Let me describe the house a little. There were no other houses nearby. On both sides were open fields, a pond behind, and a highway in front. The surroundings of the house were very beautiful. In the evening, if one went up to the terrace, one could see only fields all around. A little farther away was a mahogany garden, and next to it, a black pond. I don't know why it is called the Black Pond, but I do know it contains a lot of fish. However, no one can catch fish there, because paranormal things are present. Everyone believes there are jinns there. Once a group of fishermen came from a distant area. They said they had heard that it is impossible to catch fish in the pond, but they could try, with one condition. 3/4 of all the fish caught must be given to them. The pond's owner thought it would be impossible to catch anything. Even if they got 1/4, it would be more than enough. So they agreed. The fishermen then began preparing to catch fish. They cast nets on one side of the pond and dragged them from the other side. Yet no fish were caught except for some small ones. The fishermen were extremely frustrated. How could this happen? How could they return home empty-handed after all that effort? Fish were visible, yet none came into the nets. The fishermen decided to use a pump to drain the pond water to catch the fish. The pump was started and they were thinking, this time, the fish cannot escape. According to the pond's size, draining should not take long, but unusually, it took far more time than expected. Anyway, water was being pumped out. By that time, night had fallen. The fishermen decided to cook by the pond and told everyone that no one should enter the pond at night. Whatever needed to be done could wait for the morning. By the early morning hours, the water level had decreased. The pump was stopped, and when they turned on the lights, they saw a large number of fish. The fishermen were delighted. They planned to catch them as soon as morning light arrived. Meanwhile, the local people were very curious about the pond, so they also came in the morning to watch the fishing. But surprisingly, no one could catch any fish. Whenever someone scooped something out of the mud to put in a basket, they saw that it wasn't fish. It was a snake. Thinking it might be an optical illusion or hallucination, they searched for a while longer and asked each other, "Can you see? Isn't it a snake?" At that moment, people from above started shouting, "Snake! Snake!" Frightened, all the fishermen fled from the pond to higher ground because the pond was full of snakes, hundreds of them. Not just one or two, but hundreds of snakes. Imagine such a situation. Not just one person, but the entire community had gathered to witness it. Everyone from the area remembers that incident vividly, and it is still recounted as a common story. Even now, the pond exists, and no one dares to go there alone. Whether in the afternoon or at night, 1 or 2 snakes will always be seen, and this terrifying pond was right next to our house. The surroundings of the house give a unique feeling. The place is eerily beautiful, where you feel both attracted to stay and simultaneously afraid. Now, let's return to the main incident. We moved into the new house a little hastily because my grandfather's health was poor. Due to old age, he was in a critical condition. My father was very eager that his mother could stay at the house for a few days. So, we hurriedly moved in. There was no boundary around the house. Standing there in that frightening environment, our newly occupied house loomed large. My grandfather's condition was worsening. He started speaking incoherently, babbling nonsense, and this continued for about a week. Then his speech suddenly stopped. For 5 days, he didn't speak at all. Finally, the moment of his final farewell arrived. He passed away. Relatives came, the house was filled with people, and the atmosphere was intense, unlike usual days. After 4 or 5 days, everyone returned to their own homes, leaving only the 4 of us: mother, father, and my 2 siblings. A house after a death feels terrifying, doesn't it? Understand, then, how eerie the atmosphere was. I forgot to mention one thing. Ever since we moved into that house, Whenever night fell, I would hear strange sounds around the house. There was a collapsible gate at the front of the house, and it felt as if someone was shaking it or hanging onto it. But whenever we opened the door to check, we found no one there. Sometimes, a muffled crying sound would drift through. It's hard to explain that strange sensation. The heartbreak of Grandma's death, combined with such a haunting environment, made our lives almost unbearable. Every night we wondered, where have we come? How will we stay here with this fear? My father used to say that it feels like this for the first few days after moving into a new home. It would get better with time, he insisted. He didn't take any of these ghostly incidents seriously at all. Anyway, let me tell you about one particular night. My father suddenly had to travel for office work. Before leaving, he told us he would not return home that night. Even when he was home, we stayed huddled together in fear. Now without him, we couldn't even imagine how we would manage. Evening came. The three of us locked the front gate and the iron door at the back. We were having snacks when we suddenly felt the surroundings were even more silent than usual, and lightning flashed across the sky. It felt like a huge storm was coming. And back then, even a slight cloud meant the electricity would go out. Rain or wind, there would be no electricity. That night was no different. The electricity went off. Darkness swallowed everything instantly. The storm began with violent winds, and inside our hearts a chilling current of fear flowed. Mother sat with my brother and me, turning on a dim charger lamp and waiting for the storm to pass. In the dead of night, my brother and mother were terrified. Our house was beside the highway where robbers often roamed, but the surroundings were so eerily quiet that I was frightened to my core. The wind eased a little, but then rain joined in. The rain began pounding heavily, pouring nonstop. What a terrifying feeling it was. Even writing about it now gives me chills. The rain kept falling continuously. We were spending time in an unknown fear. And then it happened. Suddenly, with a rattling sound, someone was shaking our gate vigorously. We froze in fear. We were silent. No one spoke. The sound kept going on and on. After a while, it stopped. My mother and brother decided to check. Brother said, "I'll go to the roof and look." Mother said, "No need." I said, "Let me move the curtain and see." Then my brother slightly pulled the curtain and looked toward the gate, but said he couldn't see anyone in the dark. Mother said, "Look carefully around." No one was there. Suddenly, in a flash of lightning, they saw someone standing near the gate. A small dwarf-like old woman wearing a grayish or dirty white sari. A large veil covered her head. Because of the veil, her face was not visible. My brother moved away from the window and said, "Mom, an old lady is standing there." Mother thought maybe some elderly woman was in trouble. She said, "Come on, let's open the door and see who she is." My brother wasn't scared at all. They thought they should ask her what happened. But from childhood, I was terribly afraid of anything supernatural. I said, "Don't go, I'm scared." Mother said, "The gate is locked. We'll just open the door a little to see who it is." They opened the door and saw someone standing with her head lowered. The veil hid her face completely. Where the face should be, it looked strangely dark. Mother asked, "Who are you? What do you want? Where have you come from on such a stormy night?" The woman didn't lift her head, just nodded strangely. I still cannot forget that scene. Then the woman spoke in a voice mixed with both male and female tones. "Open the door, open the door, open the door." Her voice was terrifying. Mother slammed the door shut and said, "This doesn't sound like a human voice." I screamed and began crying. Outside, that horrifying voice kept shouting, "Open the door, open the door." After the front door, she began banging on the back door, saying, "Open the door." Sometimes the right window, sometimes the left window. Everything was happening so fast. For an elderly woman, it was impossible to move so quickly from one window to another, from one door to another. My mother understood immediately who or what. She really was. She grabbed my brother and me tightly and began reciting surahs, especially Ayatul Kursi, loudly and repeatedly. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Suddenly, my brother called out to us, and we snapped back to our senses. Mother stopped reciting. My brother said, "There's no more sound." The astonishing thing is the immense power of Ayatul Kursi, yet we often fail to realize its importance. Through its blessing, Allah saved us from that great danger in a miraculous way that night. After some time, the electricity came back. Even then, our fear wasn't fully gone. Suddenly, we heard knocking again on the gate. Thok, thok. Someone was calling my brother by name. But this time, it wasn't anything supernatural. The voice was familiar. We realized it was our cousin, Shah Jahan. He was standing at the gate drenched in rain. We felt as if life had returned to our bodies. We quickly opened the gate and brought him inside. And that's how the terrifying night finally ended. The house still exists, but it has been many years. None of us live there anymore. The house is no longer one-storied. The ground floor is now rented out. Whenever we go there, we stay upstairs. The second floor always remains locked. That eerily beautiful house surrounded by fogwood trees is ours. I don't know why people say they don't believe in jinn or spirits. If we are Muslims, then the Quran clearly mentions the existence of the jinn race. If any one of those disbelieving people had been there that night, they would have understood what fear truly is, and they would have realized whether jinns and spirits really exist in this world or not. People say they do not believe in jinns or ghosts, yet they feel scared inside a dark room. If they really do not believe in these things, then why are they afraid? So, this was the incident about jinns and spirits. With these words, Mariam ended her story. And how did you feel about this incident? You must write your opinion in the comments. And have such things happened in your life as well? If so, do not forget to share that in the comments too. All of you, please stay with us, stay well, stay healthy, and pray for us so that we can continue to return to you again and again with amazing and thrilling incidents like this. Ending here today. Allah Hafiz,